Hey, welcome back. This is a breakdown of every race in Spelljammer, which includes the Astral Elf, Autognome, Giff, Hadozee, Plasmoid, and Thri-Kreen. This was pulled from a live stream and it goes over the Bestiary text in Boo's Astral Menagerie, their flavor text and mechanical traits from Astral Adventurer's Guide, and how it compares to their old stat blocks in the Unearthed Arcana from last year. I do plan on making separate videos for each one of them, but until I can, watch this instead. I've got timestamps down below, so feel free to jump around to what you care about most. Thanks for watching. Alright, so for the first race for today, we're going to be talking about the Astral Elves. The Astral Elves are elves in space. That's it. They're elves in space. Probably not the most exciting of the 6 monsters, but certainly one that people are looking forward to playing because, you know, everyone loves elves. The thing that's specifically new about these elves is that, you know how elves live for usually about 700, 750 years? In the astral plane, elves no longer age. So that already very long lifespan of 750 years has been expanded to tens of thousands of years. So you can truly play a character that's lived for millennia. That's kind of the concept. The idea is that in the astral plane, they grow to love it because they feel closer to the elven pantheon, or I believe it's a Seldarine. They feel closer to that and they're able to tap into these holy, godly powers which come through in their character features. So basically, elves are not necessarily the strongest thing you're going to find in space, but because they live so long, that knowledge and that experience kind of pulls itself together into one very strong empire. In the older Spelljammer books, this manifests in the Imperial Elven Army, I believe, where they have a whole lot of ships that they've built, and they have been imposing this entirely kind of like elves are superior to every race, therefore they should rule everything kind of regime. And it's very political, and I believe they're trying to avoid that with this iteration. But the adventure that's coming with the 3-book set is based on a different elven empire, or one, at least loosely on the one that was in the original Spelljammer. They were very villainous in the original material. So, Celadrine? I actually have no idea how to pronounce it. But anyway, these are Astral Elves. This is the entry that they have in the Boo's Menagerie. They talk about how they make ships, how they wear visors to reveal their devotion to the elven pantheon right over here, these faceless masks that you see a whole lot of art for. The leaders of the Astral Elves are able to summon solar dragons, which is a whole new creature in Spelljammer, which is really exciting. All of their ships are built with wild space crystals and this weird organic plant-based material that hardens like ceramic. In the original Spelljammer, that was I believe it was the starfly fruit, or starfruit fly, something like that. It was like a living plant that kind of looked like a bug or a butterfly, and as you kind of grew it and allowed it to expand and grow, it would take on these giant bug-like shapes, which they made into ships like dragonflies. In this specific book, they focus on the Star Moth. The Star Moth is kind of the titular, what do you call it? Astral Elf ship in this series. But in the old Spelljammer, they had like tons of different variations. The Man of War being the most famous. Here we go, Star Moths. That's the one. They're going to have this stat block in the Astral Adventurer's Guide. Anyway, they do some really crazy stuff, and with all this time and with all this experience, they are able to kind of build themselves a kingdom and an empire that expands over many planets and worlds, which is huge. This is all the stat blocks that you'll see in what do you call it? in the Astral Menagerie. There's the Aristocrat. This is the guy that's able to summon the Solar Dragon, so he's the strongest guy. There's the Commanders, the Honor Guards, the Star Priests, and the Elf Warriors. This kind of signals that you'll be fighting a lot of elves. Yeah, there's looking at Greenforth. Yes, there are indeed Solar Dragons and Lunar Dragons in this book. It's gonna be sick. Anyway, let's talk about what changed. So as we go through this book, the Spelljammer stat block, the official one, is going to be on the left side, and the UA is going to be on the right side. So the old stuff is on the right, the new stuff's on the left, so you only have to focus on the left side if you really want to, but if you want to compare it to the original material, you look to the right. Anyway, the Astral Elf description didn't change much. It basically just says that since nothing ages in the astral plane, Astral Elves can be very, very old, up to hundreds of thousands of years. Because of that, they kind of have a long-term view on life, and they kind of lose feeling or emotion or attachment to a lot of things. Very Shatterkai in that aspect. But A little less devotion to the Shadow Queen, a little more devotion to literally every other elven god. We're going to go down to the traits. So this is the official Astral Elf stat block. And when you look at this, you're going to see a lot of things that are very, very similar. So you're going to see, first of all, Dark Vision. That's elf stuff. Bay Ancestry, elf stuff. Keen Senses, elf stuff. Here it says creature type, you are a humanoid. And I wanted to point this out in particular. I'm going to paint it like a purple because the purple means like it's interesting. In the Monsters of the Multiverse book, every single elf has the creature type, you are a humanoid. You are considered an elf for the purposes of things that refer to elves, basically. And it's missing that whole section. There's like 2 lines that it would usually point it out as elves. And the usefulness of that line is to make sure that they're able to take feats that refer to elves. So like elven accuracy, or I think wood elf magic or something like that. There are feats specific to elves that they would be able to access. Without that line, it's a little messier than it could be. It should have had that line, honestly. My guess is that they ran out of page space and they were like, we don't really need these 2 lines, so they left it out. But if you look at the Eladrin, the Shatterkai, or the Sea Elf in Monsters of the Multiverse, you'll see that they have that line very specifically. Anyway, we're going to go down to Astral Fire. Astral Fire is that manifestation of holy magic divined from their elven deities. You get Dancing Lights, Light, or Sacred Flame. Obviously, the light spells would be very, very useful in deep space, especially if your companions cannot see in the dark. But Sacred Flame is a useful cantrip, not totally wild. It's pretty good. It's cleric specific, and now you can have it, which is wonderful. Dark Vision is typical. Banshee is typical. Keen Senses is typical. Starlight Step is kind of their trademark thing. I'm gonna highlight that because it is gone. It has replaced Radiant Soul entirely. So Radiant Soul is what they had in the UA. Basically, when you died, you would regain a amount of hit points and make sure you don't perish. You know, this gives you back some hit points and keeps you alive for a little bit longer. What they did is instead gave Starlight Step, and Starlight Step is just Phase Step from the Eladrin and or whatever the step is called for Shatterkai. It allows you to, as a bonus action, magically teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. Basically a Misty Step without having to cast a spell, so it cannot be countered spelled. It's a very good way of getting out of trouble, but it has no riders, so it has nothing like the Eladrin where you can change this per season, and it doesn't have the resistance that Shatterkai gives you. It's very specifically just teleporting, which is neat, but you know, could have been more exciting. Now, the big thing about this race that really makes it stand out is Astral Trance. And you guys are going to see Astral Trance as well on the Githyanki from Monsters of the Multiverse. Just like all other elves, you don't need to sleep. You can finish a long rest in 4 hours, which is wonderful. Now, the big thing here is that after you finish a trance, you get a proficiency in one skill of your choice. And that skill can be anything you want. So if you're missing something, if you feel like you're about to read a lot of books, it'd be great to have the history skill proficiency. If you're about to sneak into some weird spacecraft, picking up the stealth skill would be very useful here. Basically, it's a kind of a Swiss Army knife for whatever you need at the time. Now, this may seem really powerful, but the number of times you're actually going to switch out a skill for another one is few and far between, because this does take a whole long rest to set up. So you kind of have to be ready in advance to deal with whatever you're looking to prepare for. It is better than all the other trances, so I believe all the other trances look like this, where you can pick up a weapon or a tool of your choice. This is the new multiverse stuff right here. So this is useful because picking up skills is good. The way they define it is that you pick it up from shared elven memory, which is neat. Basically, there's the idea that all elves share the memories of their past lives, or you as an elf kind of can tap into what you used to be in previous lives, which is really cool. But when you live in space, apparently it's stronger, and you can tap into the experience of entities anywhere in space, which is what Githyanki can do as well. And that's pretty much it. Don't all elves get a skill and or tool weapon? Not all elves get skills. Now, I believe from Trance, as of Monsters of the Multiverse, Shatterkai, Sea Elves, and Eladrin can only get a tool or a weapon proficiency. They cannot get skills. Skills is something unique to the Githyanki and to the Astral Elf. Yeah, exactly that. So this is, elves always have a strong stat block. resistance to advantage against charms, perception proficiency, a teleport. They have dark vision, of course. They have whatever skill they need in the moment. It's a good stat block. It's not very exciting and it's not very new, but you know, people love elves, and now you can decorate them in stars and constellations and little comet streaks. I think everyone's gonna like that. Astral Elf, solid pick. As good as any other elf, I'll be honest. I still say that the Shatter Kai is probably the strongest at the moment, until the old elves get revamped just like the new ones. Moving on to the next thing, we're going to talk about the Autognome. The Autognome is basically the mechanical choice in this book. An Autognome is a mechanical gnome, and it resembles the rock gnome that created it. Obviously, because it's a robot, you'd never mistake it for a gnome. It's just built to kind of look like them. They could be made out of anything, whether it be metal or stone or some weird amalgamation of the two. And it's very specifically the CP30 R2D2 aesthetic. It is made to be a servant. It is made to obey its creator's commands. It was made for a very specific purpose. But something went wrong, and that caused the Autognome to gain freedom and independence. So basically what turned it into an adventurer was something that happened and screwed with its programming and sent it on a grand adventure. That's the idea of the Autognome, which is really cool. We've seen constructs in the past, which are the Warforged, which is not technically a construct. It's actually a humanoid. This race is very specifically a construct, and with all the things constructs come with. I have here something that's very interesting that you'll only find in the Bestiary stat block, that most Autognomes have three very specific directives, which could be cool inspiration for if you want to role play as them. Defend gnomes who are being attacked by non-gnomes, defend yourself if you're being attacked, and protect infants and youngsters from harm. Now, this is the fun one, as they describe, because they don't specify what kind of infants. So even if this is a great world-ending monster or some sort of giant dragon, if it happens to be a kid or a baby, the Autognome might in fact be called to protect it, even if its adventurers deem it dangerous or unsettling. So here it says, if I see a group of adults attacking a lunar dragon wormling, for instance, it would come to the wormling's defense, not the adults. And defending gnomes who are being attacked by non-gnomes is always very interesting, especially if the gnomes you're protecting are particularly evil. It's that kind of thing where you have to decide with your autonomy, are you going to stick with the original directives you were given, or do you want to expand and build a morality of your own? It's cool. So the Autognome has a couple of history things you could choose from. The list was shortened from the UA D8, so 8 options to D6. Again, I think this was just to save page space. They narrowed it down to the ones that are most relevant or available. So the first one stays. Creator gave you autonomy themselves, so it wasn't a mistake. Number 2, your creator died. Number 3, a glitch caused you to forget your original programming. That stayed. So a glitch gave you your freedom. 4, you don't like how you're being treated, so you ran away from home. Very Toy Story, I suppose. Number 5, you're built to accomplish a special mission, and that's your goal. And 6, you felt trapped in the role you were built for and abandoned your creator, hoping to achieve something greater. The things that were removed were this one: you were stolen from your creator and longed to return to them. That one was removed, and I believe number 3. The one that says that you accidentally harmed your creator and you're running away out of fear of punishment. So, list is still good. I think there's a lot of really good premises here. I've probably seen a lot of them in movies. This is very fantasy fiction, sci-fi. Good starters for any good free robot stories. So the Autognome didn't change much, actually. This is one of the smaller changes. We're going to go through the flavor text, which of course didn't change much in particular. This yellow is basically showing what changed between these two flavor text boxes, but mechanically, nothing changes about their actual function. It's basically describing or shortening very specific situations and what your Autognome would be doing, and that you can choose from the history table, and that they live for greater than 500 years, obviously until you rust or break down or lose power, things like that. Next thing, let's go to the Autognome traits. So obviously here is one of the most trademark things. You are a construct, which means that you are not affected by a great number of spells that target humans, which are Charm Person, Hold Person, Dominate Person. You are damaged by things that deal extra damage to constructs. There are a couple of things you cannot benefit from, like certain healing spells, but we will get to that later. So this is the first construct, I believe, that's made it to official D&D. The first original construct was the Reborn, and I believe it's no longer a construct. Can't quite remember if someone could correct me on that. They know they were constructs in the UA. Anyway, you are size small, very specific. Warforged are size medium, so you will always be gnome-sized. Speed is 30, which is normal. Armored casing is a fantastic feature. It's basically a mage armor automatically. Your AC is 13 plus your dexterity modifier. We saw this in the UA and it goes unchanged. Fantastic. If you want to go full dex, you won't really need armor for a very long time until you find something that's inherently magical. Build for success is, let me see. Did it change? I don't believe it did. Maybe it did. What changed? Probably one word. You could do attack roll, ability check, or saving throw unique. You could do so after seeing the D20 roll before the effects are resolved. You can use this trait a number of times. Weird. I don't know exactly what's different. I don't think there is. But before the effects. Oh, it's just this word. That's dumb. Okay, I was like, it was slightly off, but I couldn't tell what was wrong. Basically, just added the word roll. This is great. So, proficiency bonus uses per long rest. You can add a D4 to attack roll, ability check, or saving throw you make. And you can do so after seeing the D20 roll, but before the effects of the roll are resolved. So that's a fantastic. It's like a bless on reaction. The reason this is so good is that it doesn't cost a reaction. It doesn't cost any sort of action economy at all. You can pop it onto anything you want, and you'll do great. So you can use this freely without having to worry about if you have to save a slot for a shield or absorb elements or anything that requires your reaction, protection, interception, all those things. This requires no action economy at all, which makes it fantastic. You know what? I'm just going to start coloring things because I think this is great. I think this is great as well. Let's do that. Yep. Next is Healing Machine. Now, Healing Machine is the combination of, I believe it is, let me see here, Mechanical Nature, Long Rest. Yeah, it's just True Life, but renamed. So True Life technically was just renamed into Healing Machine with some important changes. So if the mending spell is cast on you, you can spend a hit die, roll it, and regain a number of hit points equal to that roll plus your con mod. So basically, a spell that usually casts for a minute. If you spend a minute doing it, you can use one of your hit dice without having to short rest, which is really good. You can recover hit points on the fly. In addition, your creator designed you to benefit from special spells that preserve life but don't normally affect constructs. Cure Wounds, Healing Word, Mass Cure Wounds, Healing Word, and Spare the Dying. Now, it used to be just Cure Wounds, Healing Word, and Spare the Dying, so they added Mass Cure Wounds and Mass Healing Word. Important to know that these aren't all the healing spells in the game. There are still other healing spells out there that only target humanoids, but these are kind of the most common, therefore they're the ones offered. You still are a little bit weaker on the what can target you thing, beneficial spells at least, because you're a construct, but hey, thanks for subscribing. Bombs and Dean. Welcome. Cool. These are new spells that can benefit you over the original 3, which is nice, you know. Mechanical Nature, you have resistance to poison damage and immunity to disease, and you have advantage on saving throws against being paralyzed or poisoned. You don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. Now, this is just fantastic, right? Everything about this is really, really good. Resistance to the most common damage type in the game, immunity to disease, which is basically a paladin feature, and you get advantage on 2 saving throws, paralyzed and poisoned. Like, this is golden. I believe that Warforged had a lot of these as well, especially that you don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. These are definitely very Warforged effects. When it had that before, so we knew what this was going to look like walking into it. Sentry's Rest, as long as you spend at least 6 hours in an active, motionless state instead of sleeping, you can still take a long rest. In this state, you appear inert, but you remain conscious. It's almost exactly the same written. I believe there's only minor changes here. Yeah, so this is just like aren't unconscious, remain conscious. Like, it's very, very small differences. This is also something that Warforged had, and it was fantastic there. And finally, Specialized Design, which we had here. You gain 2 tool proficiency of your choice. This is new, this line right here, selected from the player's handbook. Boom, But yeah, that clarifies that even if they add new tools and new systems and new worlds or settings, you can only pick from the player's handbook stuff. Overall, fantastic stat block. Let's start from the top again. Immunity to a lot of humanoid charm spells, automatic mage armor, no action economy built for success, D plus D4 to a lot of your things. You can heal without using your hit dice without having to rely on a short rest. More whole healing spells that can affect you. Resistance to the most popular damage type in the game that's not BPS. Advantage on saving throws against very good things like paralyzed and poisoned. A solid conscious self during sleep, and 2 free tool proficiencies. Fantastic stat block. The only caveat, you have to be small and you have to look like a gnome. And that's it. I think it's great. This one mostly did not change too much from the UA, but otherwise just a really good thing to pick up. And I think it's very flavorful. I think this is a solid construct to place in any setting, as long as you can figure out who in the world built you, what you were built for, and what you want to do now that you're not doing your original job. Okay, Autognome is done. Let's move on. Here comes the Giff. Now, the Giff is one of my absolute favorite monsters in the Monster Manual. Was it in the Monster Manual? I don't know. Maybe it was in something else? Mordenkainen's? Can't remember. Anyway, I love the Giff. This art has existed for like a decade, and it's finally being put to good use. Giff are 7 feet tall, hippo-headed people. They're big, they're bulky. In wild space and associated ports, Giff are most often encountered as spacefaring mercenaries, renowned for their martial training, love of explosives, and are typically armed with gleaming firearms. So they're big, they're burly, and they use guns. That's the whole aesthetic. That's everything you gotta roll. That's the 3 lines you need, and you can play a Giff. Every aspect of these Giff society is organized among military lines. From birth until death, each has a military rank, which is so funny to me, because imagine like you're 2 wonderful Giff parents are in the hospital. They give birth to a Giff baby, and they get their name, their birth certificate, and a medal of their rank in Giff society, which is super funny. Promotions don't depend on time and service, but are granted by superiors as rewards for valor. So you slowly rank up from the moment you're born. It's hilarious to me. They love muskets and grenades. Bigger the boom, the brighter the flash. The thicker the smoke it produces, the greater the glory for the one wielding the weapon. We love it. Ostentatious, big personality. I'm gonna love playing as a Giff when I get the option to. I think it's been a long time coming. I think Giff used to be taller. They used to be like 8 or 9 feet tall, but they were reduced to 7 feet tall because they have to be a player race. But let's keep going. These are the stat blocks you're going to encounter in Boo's Astral Menagerie. Giff Shipmate, Giff Shock Trooper. I believe these use very specific... they just run into stuff. They just knock things over. So they shoot you from a distance and then just bum rush you, which is fantastic. And the Giff Warlord is the one in charge. They use really cool stuff. And they're usually the ones that have a high enough rank to amass power and influence and command small fleets and sell swords, provide magic firepower. They're the leaders. They're the Giff. This is so fun. So if you recall, if anybody was here 10, 11 months ago when this UA officially came out, the Giff stat block was Garbaggio. It was very, very bad. Happy to say that it has changed significantly. And we'll kind of go into that as we go to the next page. So this is the lore behind it. Basically, this whole paragraph right here was cut out where they like stories, and that's basically it. And they were given this whole new lore. And if anybody's familiar with Spelljammer, I don't know if this existed before, but let me summarize what this says. The Giff originated from one world, but now that world does not exist because nobody knows where it is. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. It's literally space, but nobody knows where it is. And the gods that made that land have been forgotten. They have no names. They are simply petrified stone bodies floating in space. But the Giff gods still exist because on a deep psychic level, they remain connected to their creations who have, and read this with me here, just enough divine spark left in them to imbue Giff with sparks of their own, which Giff have learned to channel through their weapons. Most Giff have no idea where this so-called astral spark come from, but they feel its presence most strongly when they are in the wild space or the astral sea. So, the Giff gods who created the long-lost Giff world gifted to their Giff the love for explosions and spark. They were like, hey, you don't know who we are anymore. You don't remember your old world, but you love guns because we think they're cool and you should. I just imagine like a holy like musket falling from the sky into the hands of this Giff who worships their cleric deity, or a spiritual weapon that's simply like an explosive piece of dynamite. I don't know if this is original Spelljammer lore. Help me out. If the Giff gods have always gifted firearm love. Anyway, obviously they make the joke about gifs and gifs. Giff say it with some say it with a hard G, some say with a soft G, so Giff or Giff. And people have arguments about it. I think that's charming. Anyway, let's talk about this, and I want to focus on the UA first. So this is the let's stay here. This is the original UA. This is it. This whole little paragraph right here. This is all that the Giff got in the original thing. See, if you remember, one of the big things that's happening in D&D is that we're trying to step away from cultural influence in stat blocks. So we consider military rank, we consider having guns a cultural thing, right? So any reference to that was completely removed. And Wizards of the Coast had to say like, so because we're removing all of this, what's left? What is a Giff without their military rank and without their firearms? And this is what they came up with, right? Humanoid, medium, walking speed 30 feet, and you have a swim speed equal to your walking speed. Hippos swim, right? Technically they don't. They just walk along the ground of an ocean, and they're too strong to be stopped by water. They don't really swim, but it doesn't matter. This is relevant. This is a hippo thing. Damage dealer. Like a hippo in a crystal shop, you are naturally adept at damaging things. You can re-roll damage dice once per turn. Okay, sure. Interesting, I guess. And then hippo build, you get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and you count as one size larger. The classic, it's a big size or giant size ability. And that's it. That was all that was left of the Giff. And obviously people naturally complained, and they talked about this in their video, that Giff are more than that. You're losing all the pomp and circumstance. You're losing all the flavor of the Giff by removing all of their cultural traits. And how they resolved it was basically turning that cultural trait into a religious thing and giving them a god that makes them charmed by firearms and explosives. So this is what it becomes. And this is honestly much better. You are a humanoid, you are medium, your walk speed is 30 feet, all of this stays exactly the same. And Astral Spark. Your psychic connection to the astral plane enables you to mystically access a spark of divine power, which you can channel through your weapons. When you hit a creature with a simple or martial weapon, you can cause the target to take extra force damage equal to your proficiency bonus, PB times per long rest, once per turn. So a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest, you can add force damage equal to your PB to any attack using a simple or martial weapon. So no spells, just weapons. It could be a stick, it could be a gun, it could be a quarterstaff, it could be a crossbow. Any weapon you pick up, you can just add this magic boom gifted to you by your hippo gods to make your attack a little bit more powerful. I don't think it's that powerful. I don't think this is very potent. Like at level 1 to 4, this is doing an extra 4 damage per long rest. 5 to 8, it's doing 9 damage, and then 9 to 12, I believe, it's doing like what? 16 damage per long rest? It's not that big a deal. It's mostly flavor. This is mostly flavor. So I think overall this feature is just kind of meh. I guess it works. Better than damage dealer, that's for sure. Or at least flavorful wise. Anyway, firearms mastery. So this is the interesting thing. You have a mystical connection. Let's just hover on this line for a bit. You have a mystical connection to firearms. Your god loves guns. That traces back to the gods of the Giff who delighted in such weapons. Your gods loved guns. Remember that. That is so important. Your gods loved guns. You have proficiency with all firearms and ignore the loading property of any firearm. In addition, attacking at long range with a firearm doesn't impose disadvantage on your attack roll, which is sizable, right? This is a big deal. This is a whole feat. Your firearms automatically get their full long range, and you have a proficiency in all firearms. Now, we understand, we all know, we've all played D&D, right? Proficiency with firearms doesn't really mean much if there are no firearms in your setting, which is implying that you should probably include firearms in your setting if you want your player character to like use this at all, right? Anyway, I'm looking at the chart for firearms right now. The pistol does 1d10 piercing. The musket does 1d12 piercing. All things considered, pretty good. Pretty good stats. The modern items, automatic pistol 2d6, revolver 2d10, hunting rifle 2d10, revolver 2d8, hunting rifle 2d10, automatic rifle 2d8, shotgun 2d8. Those are big weapons. We're talking about futuristic items, laser pistol, 3d6 radiant, antimatter rifle, 6d8 necrotic, laser rifle, 3d8 radiant, and all of these have ridiculous ranges. You can look this up. I believe this is in the PHB, no, Dungeon Master's Guide. Yeah, it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. These are all just very specific weapons you could pick up. I recommend sticking to the Renaissance items, which are just 1d10 and 1d12. Those are respectable long-ranged items that do really well. So work with that if you have someone who wants to play Giff. If you want to give them stronger guns, by all means, more power to you. Yeah, so this is the new Giff. I think it's fantastic. I like it a little bit more. Definitely more than I like this. This was the most boring thing I could ever imagine. The thing about Giffs is, which is very unique, is that even though they're gigantic, they can roll with a strength build, which is really good because they have advantage on strength-based checks and saving throws. So they're automatically good at grappling. They don't need to take that level in Barbarian to get advantage on these checks. Which means that if you want to play a Giff fighter or a Giff paladin, you can use that strength to your advantage and get really good grapple checks without having to multiclass one level into Barbarian for rage. Suddenly you're a very good grappler without having to multiclass, which is fantastic. But you could also play a ranged character because Firearms Mastery makes you amazing at long range. Astral Spark means you can apply damage on your shots. You can play at both ranges, and they kind of reference this in the Giff Shock Trooper step. Text, which says you can soften up an enemy from a distance with firearms before charging into melee to mop up the foes that remain standing. So long range, short range, Giffs are good. Giffs are really talented. And that's kind of what you got to watch out for. That's the Giff. And I believe we are halfway through all of the races. So let's keep going. The next thing we want to talk about is the Hadozee, and a lot of you are holding your breath because you were waiting for something like this, because it's been quite the topic for people who are already familiar with what Hadozee can do. So, from the top, Hadozee are slender, highly adaptive humanoids with simian features and their own language. Feet fully as dexterous as their hands, even to the extent of having toes that serve as opposable thumbs. Look at that apple. Look at that. Membranes of skin hang loosely from their arms and legs, which is kind of gross, and I feel like I trip over this all the time. When stretched taut between outstretched limbs, these membranes enable the Hadozee to glide. On Yazir, their home world, Hadozees lived high up in the trees to avoid large predators that walk on land. Today, wild space is where they feel most at home. Hadozees are, for obvious reasons, they're flying monkeys, hired by mercenary crews and other spacefaring folk. They can climb, if they can glide. They're accustomed to space travel because they can jump off the ship, use the gravity of the Spelljammer ship to go to the underside and appear on the opposite side of the ship, which is sick and super thematic. We love it. Hadozee explorers, shipmates, and warriors are the ones you might be fighting. These are all beast stat blocks. These are all stat blocks you're going to run into in the Menagerie or in the Adventures, which is really good. They're just very talented. They're very useful. They're flying, gliding monkeys. They can climb, and they're very interesting. They serve as safe squads like the soaring Hadozees, the jam and wingbats, and the night howlers. That's the Hadozee, just as a flavor for people who don't know what this is. This is a monkey race with wings. That pretty much sums it up. But what is so interesting about this, and I'm going to go into this because we're about to compare the UA to the new text, and a lot has changed, which is very, very interesting. So let's talk about that. First, we're going to do the flavor text. So this is the original flavor text. This is the new flavor text, which is 3 paragraphs longer. And I'm going to go delve in. I highlighted these yellow because they've entirely changed. I didn't want to highlight the whole text because every single word has changed. Originally, they just defined what we talked about in the flavor text. They were hunted by large natural predators. They worked together to survive, and that same instinct drives them to cultivate friendships, knowing there is safety in numbers. Now, I have to say because people bring it up. The Hadozee weren't originally the Hadozee. The Hadozee are referencing the Yazirians from the original Space Frontiers, I believe. So the Hadozee, the Plasmoids, and the Thri-Kreen are based on the Yazirians, the Dralicites, and the Vrusk, which they just replaced with Thri-Kreen. So the original flying monkeys were something from the 1980s, and they just brought them back as a new name, which is referenced here in their homeland of Yazir. So Yazir is a reference to Yazirians, which is their original name. Anyway, let's talk about the lore, because the lore is very, very fun. Originally, they were timid animals no bigger than house cats. They were tiny monkeys, baby monkeys. They were hunted by larger natural predators, which means they went to the trees and developed flaps that enabled them to glide from branch to branch, staying away from predators. Now let's get a little bit anime with this. Let's get a little bit classic lore. Several hundred years ago, a wizard visited Yazir, the Hadozee homeworld, with a small fleet of spelljamming ships. Under the wizard's direction, apprentices laid magic traps and captured dozens of Hadozees. The wizard fed the captives an experimental elixir that enlarged them and turned them into sapient bipedal beings. They are lab experiments. The Hadozee were made in a lab. Everything that they have was from a test tube. The elixir had the side effect of intensifying the Hadozee's panic response, making them more resilient when harmed. They made super soldiers. The wizard's plan was to create an army of enhanced Hadozee warriors for sale to the highest bidder, but instead the wizard's apprentices grew fond of the Hadozees and helped them escape. A little bit of Planet of the Apes there. The apprentices and the Hadozees were forced to kill the wizard, after which they fled, taking with them all remaining vials of the wizard's experimental elixir. Now, you would think, right, that when you are experimented on and tested on and transformed into this new thing by a dude that plans to sell you as slaves, you get rid of the elixir, right? You get rid of the elixir. But no, they didn't. It says here, with the help of their liberators, the Hadozee returned to their homeworld and used the elixir to create more of their kind. They realized, hey, wait, this is kind of good. This is kind of great. We're actually really strong. Why don't we turn all Hadozee like this? In time, all Hadozee newborns came to possess the traits of enhanced Hadozees. Then, centuries ago, Hadozees took to the stars, leaving Yazir's fearsome predators behind. They were like, yo, let's just give everybody the super serum. Let's make everybody really strong, so we don't have to worry about these larger natural predators that we were so stressed about for hundreds of years. And that's a vibe. That's definitely a vibe. In addition to being natural climbers, they have feet that are dexterous as their hands. They extend to having opposable thumbs, members of skin, let them glide, blah, blah, blah. We read about this before. And they wrap these wings around themselves to keep warm. That's the new lore. This was the original lore. 2 paragraphs about how they were scared of people. They were scared of predators, so they learned to fly and glide. Here, a wizard transformed them, and now they are super soldier monkeys. And that's the lore. Welcome to Spelljammer. That's the lore. They're all Captain Americas. Anyway, let's keep going and talk about how does this change the mechanics? Not much, to be frank. You are a humanoid. You can be medium or small because you're a monkey, which is wonderful. You get a walking speed and climbing speed equal to your walking speed. Just this alone is fantastic. I'm gonna color this green just because it's so good. Dexterous feet. As a bonus action, you can use your feet to manipulate an object, open or close a door or container, or pick up or set down a tiny object. Now this is important. There's an important change here. I'm gonna highlight this in yellow because it did change from this. Originally, you can take the use an object action as a bonus action. So what this does, which is different from this, is that this lets you use magic items as a bonus action. That's what use an object is useful for. So use an object, good for drinking a healing potion, good for opening your magic items. That's the major practicalities that are lost here for balance reasons. Now you can only use it to manipulate an object. This is some touchy wording. I don't know how I feel about manipulate an object. People are going to question what this means. Open or close a door or container, or pick up or set down a tiny object. Now, a fun thing, I think I just bumped my mic. A fun thing that I heard from, Taryn and Ross from their Eye Patch and Monocle stream is the monkey in a barrel strategy, where you just sit in a barrel for the whole fight, and you use an object interaction to open the barrel, action to shoot or attack, whatever you want to do, and then bonus action, close the barrel. So you pop out of full cover, you take your shots, you close it back so you have full cover again. You could do that with doors, you could do that with barrels or crates or anything that seals you away. So you can have, if you're very small, you could be a tiny monkey, a small monkey in a little barrel that sits on the back of a barbarian, maybe a Giff or something, and you can just pop out and shoot people and hide back again. So the action economy of being able to use an object isn't entirely lost. It's still useful for interacting with the world around you. Bonus action, messing with your surroundings is still very good. Now, it's activated not just for magic items. Okay, maybe so. Who knows? If you could still use magic items with this. Anyway, that doesn't matter because it's not that anymore. So let's talk about glide. And I'm gonna highlight. If your player is about to play Hadozee, you have to set a ruling on this very specifically. You have to. So if you are not incapacitated wearing heavy armor, you can extend your skin membrane and glide. When you do so, you can perform the following aerial maneuvers, which hasn't changed from this. You can move up to 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot you descend in the air at no movement cost to you. Originally, it was just this. It did not include the at no movement cost to you. So it did not include this. And this, I'm going to immediately highlight this in gray because this is a terrible line. It's going to cause a lot of problems. For perspective, right? Moving in any direction costs movement speed. You walk forward, backward, left, or right. If you have 30 move speed, for example, that'll spend all 30 movement speed. If you fly upwards or climb upwards, that costs movement speed. So flying upwards costs 30 feet of movement. The only situation where you do not use movement speed or your speed to move is falling. So as per Xanathars, right? As per Xanathars, when you fall, you can fall 500 feet in a turn, right? You can fall 500 feet in a turn. If you read this, it says you can move 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot you descend in the air at no movement cost to you. Falling is descending. If you fall 500 feet in 6 seconds, which is just about the speed you fall in real life, you can move 5 feet horizontally at no movement cost to you. So what? 500 feet times 25 times 5 feet horizontally is 2,500 feet horizontally in any direction you want. There's no limitation in what direction you glide. That's never been a limitation. Again, there is no limit in D&D as to how fast you can move in a turn, how quickly you can move in a turn. That is besides your walking speed or besides your normal speed. So moving 2,500 feet horizontally, rules as written in one turn, completely works. It completely works. So 2,500 feet horizontally is very, very fast. Does anyone want to pull up a calculator and figure out how fast that is? So I'm going to do that right now. So 2,500 feet, right? We'll divide that by someone with a big brain. Tell me how many feet are in a mile. We can do the math real quick. I believe it's 5,280. You can correct me. So 5,280. So that is 0.47 miles. 0.47 miles in 6 seconds. So if it's 0.47 miles in 6 seconds, times that by 10. I'm sorry I'm not doing this on screen. So that means 4.7 miles in a minute. 4.7. So 2,500 feet horizontally is 4.7 miles in a minute. Let's bump that up to an hour. So 4.7 times 60, right? 4.7 times 60 is 284 miles an hour. If you're not from the US, feel free to convert that into something that's not freedom units. But 284 miles an hour is very, very fast. Very, very, very fast. That is ridiculous. And obviously, this will not be very practical in combat because you're not always falling 500 feet. Or are you? So let's put it in perspective, right? You jump, high jump. You jump what? 3 feet? You can high jump 3 feet, right? Just do that standing, whatever. High jump 3 feet. You can then, as you're falling, because falling happened instantaneously, move 15 feet horizontally. So 5 times 3 feet jumping is 15 feet of horizontal movement speed for the cost of 3 feet walking. Times that by 10, which means with 30 feet walking speed, if you just keep hopping in place and gliding, you can move 150 feet per turn with your base walking speed of 30. Which is dumb, right? It's silly. It's a little too ridiculous. Now, as you could probably reason, 100 feet movement speed per turn, still not broken. Speed only matters so much in combat. but it's really, really good, right? It's really, really good. If you hop 5 times on your turn and glide 150 feet, by all means, that's certainly possible. And it seems unintended. It seems like an unnecessary fix. In the original wording, when you fall, you can move 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot you descend. You are still limited by movement speed. So you can move 5 feet horizontally really, really quick, but that'll cost your movement speed. And at 30 feet glide, you will stop, and at your next turn, you will continue your glide. And it seems kind of clunky in combat because it is, but it's still very, very useful outside of combat. But now when it costs no movement, it's ridiculously fast. I don't think that was the intention. I think they will clarify this. Hopefully they will, because this is an otherwise very, very cool race. This is dumb. But that's all I'm going to say about that. Anyway, if your monkey's traveling 284 miles an hour, by golly, they're going fast, faster than your ship, probably. Anyway, when you take damage from a fall, you can use your reaction to reduce the fall's damage to 0, which is amazing, right? This was removed from the Owlin. This is amazing, because you already have a climb speed to climb up to high heights, to fall, to glide, and you can reduce all that damage with a reaction. So what would originally be the opportunity cost of falling 30 feet every turn, you can completely remove. You know, I think they tried to make glide practical in combat, and in doing so, they broke just a little bit more than they were intending. But so be it. Okay, I see chat doing all the calculations for me. I'll trust you guys. I'm probably saying the wrong number, but so be it. Anyway, their last feature, which they got from their lore, if you remember. They got this from their lore. Hadozee Resilience. When you take damage, you can use a reaction to roll a d6, add your proficiency bonus for d6 plus proficiency, and reduce the damage by that amount. Proficiency bonus uses per long rest. It's not quite as good as the Goliath, but it's still very good. So d6 plus prof is almost guaranteed to be 5 reduced damage as a reaction. Really useful at low levels, probably still useful at high levels if you don't have your reaction to use for something. Good for like fighters and paladins and people who don't usually have reactions like spellcasters. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, the Hadozee, very cool race. Very aesthetic. I could imagine playing one of these. I really much would enjoy that. I think the lore is kind of silly. Kind of looks like a Captain America kind of situation combined with Planet of the Apes. This whole text was used to justify giving them this feature right here. This whole thing was used to justify this feature where they get a little bit more resilience. But, you know, go with that. It's space. Things are crazy in space. Things are crazy in space. Let's keep going. Plasmoids, my love. Let's talk about you. Plasmoids are intelligent oozes. They're intelligent oozes. They got brains. Oozes and brains. Alter the shape at will. Malleable texture. 5 pseudopods, which I believe are just 2 arms, 2 legs, and your pseudopod. Oh, maybe not. Each one up to 5 feet long. How weird. They can use their pseudopods for locomotion as well as manipulating objects. Each one has a massive nerves or a brain. So, depicted in the Spelljammer book, the new Spelljammer book, they have no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no facial features, no ears, very little detail. But I mean, you could change that. That's all flavor. They have no internal organs, but they can breathe through pores, which absorb oxygen. They can also talk by breathing out of these pores. And they have this random paragraph about like reproduction, which I'm going to highlight just because it's interesting. And it was totally unnecessary. Basically, when a plasmoid and here's your birds and bees lesson, everyone. When a plasmoid mates with another plasmoid, they just kind of merge together, and then they split. It's a very quick like marriage and divorce. Now, when they split, let me see. After merging the 2 plasmoids separate, one of them is divided in half. So one of the parents, and it's decided randomly, you can flip a coin for it. One of the plasmoids splits in half and makes an identical copy of themselves, but without the knowledge and without the experience. So 2 plasmoids combine, they split, 1 plasmoid splits into 2, making 3 of them, and it's an exact copy of the original plasmoid with no memories, no knowledge, no experience. That's how plasmoids are born. Now you know. These are the stat blocks that you will be fighting. The Plasmoid boss is my favorite because it basically just says, sometimes, mistakenly, Plasmoids get really big. At 20 years old, first of all, plasmoids reach adulthood at age 20 years old, and they balloon in size to large. They're just big. If you ever see the art, it's just a blob. And now, since they're big and strong, they boss around real smaller creatures and end up in positions of power, surrounded by loyal underlings, sycophants, and would-be usurpers. A plasmoid boss might be the master of a guild, leader of a criminal enterprise, Lord Blob, and lords of a plasmoid community or captain of a spelljamming ship. Regardless, they need not only their strength and size, but charm and wit. They have to be charming. Guys, this is so great. Obviously, Plasmoid Explorer is a plasmoid that likes to travel, and they have a little backpack. Such an explorer usually travels light, keeping its possession in a backpack or similar container. They always have a little backpack. Look at that, little lunchbox with them. Plasmoid Warrior and these guys get a little bit more armor because they can toughen their outer surfaces like a little carapace. Wonderful. Let's keep going. Now, nothing really changed about their flavor text. This was always a weird phrase that they removed. They called the clusters of nerves ganglia, and they were like, well, that's kind of nerdy. Let's completely get rid of that. And this is the only word that's changed. Otherwise, exactly the same. They can look like any plasmoid. They can take the shape of a humanoid or not if they don't want to. They can absorb dyes or food coloring to just change their color to whatever they want. They probably sell that in stores, like your Space Walmart or whatever, which is so good. They can feel. They can recognize light, heat, texture, sound, pain, and vibrations. They're so lifelike. And they can look like humanoids. And they whistle when they talk, which is wonderful. And when they sleep, they flatten onto a pancake. Isn't that adorable? That they just pancake when they sleep. Now let's talk about the changes, which thankfully weren't much. You are an ooze, which is fantastic because oozes don't really have any disadvantages, except for one, which we'll talk about. But they're not affected by charm person, hold person, dominate person, not affected by spells that target humanoids very specifically. And you know what? A lot of abjuration spells don't target oozes. They target extraplanars like celestials, like infernals, like elementals, things they want to keep out. Oozes, come on in. Nothing really blocks oozes. The only spell that targets oozes is Sunbeam, which is so strange. And it says oozes have disadvantage against Sunbeam. Why? No one knows. But that's the only spell, so live your best life. You can be medium or small. You choose the size when you select this race. The only thing I would have wanted from ooze is to choose if you could be medium or small and like bounce between the two. So if I want to be medium, I can be medium. Or if I want to be small, I can be small. I wish that was a thing. It's not. Whatever. Walking speed 30 feet. Amorphous you can squeeze through a space as narrow as 1 inch wide, which is really good. And they smartly added the caveat that is provided you are wearing and carrying nothing. So yeah, feel free to sneak into all of those bases. Feel free to sneak into all those rogue hideouts or all of those secret ships that you can't slide into. Just don't bring anything with you, which is dangerous in itself, which is so fun. You advantage on ability checks which you make to initiate or escape a grapple. Again, great feature for grapplers. You don't have to be a barbarian. You could be a fighter or a paladin and still do great grapple checks, which makes sense because you're an ooze. Dark vision didn't change. That makes sense. Obviously, they couldn't give you blind sight because that's busted. Hold breath. You can hold your breath for an hour in case you're in water or something, or noxious gases. You visit Jupiter. Hold your breath for an hour. Natural resilience, which is fantastic. You have resistance to acid and poison damage. Wow. So good. So good. And you advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. Also very good. Again, poison is the most common damage type. Even more common than fire. You learn something new every day. Except for obviously bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. And you get acid, which is icing on the top. Now, Shape Self is probably my only gripe about this, because they did change some things which I liked, but some things I didn't. So, as an action, previously it was no action required, so I'm just going to highlight that because they removed it. As an action, you can reshape your body to give yourself a head, 1 or 2 arms, 1 or 2 legs, and makeshift hands or feet, and you can revert to a limbless blob. While you have a human-like shape, you can wear clothing and armor made for a humanoid your size. This is basically the line saying, hey, you can use magic items that are used for humanoids because they fit you, as long as you fit that, which makes sense. As a bonus action, you can extrude a pseudopod that is 6 inches wide and 10 feet long. Now, this kind of surprises me, right? This is kind of weird because, very specifically, 10 feet long. You're reading this. Let's scroll up. Over here, it says, plasmoids can extrude up to 5 pseudopods, each one up to 5 feet long. Why is it 5 feet long here and 10 feet long somewhere else? I don't know. But as a bonus action, you can summon a pseudopod, and as part of the same bonus action, I'm going to highlight this as well. I'm going to put this in orange, and orange usually means unfavorable. You can use the pseudopod to manipulate an object, open and close a container, or pick up or set down a tiny object, very similar to the Hadozee with their feet. The pseudopod contains no sensory organs, can't attack, can't activate magic items, and lift more than 10 pounds. Which is good. This is a good restriction, because you don't want them to have too many arms, which we're going to get into with the Thri-Kreen, right? So, why this is weird, right, is that after you extrude a pseudopod, right, assuming it persists and remains there, right, and it doesn't immediately retract, it doesn't say on further bonus actions that you can use that same pseudopod. It only says here as part of the same bonus action, so the turn that you extrude the pseudopod, you can use it to do things. So does that mean it's useless every other turn following? If you look at something like Spiritual Weapon, it says, as part of the same bonus action as well as every bonus action after, which is, the important line, you can do all these things. But now it only says as part of the same bonus action, which is weird. Just a little bit strange. But that's just me. It also there's also no limit on how many pseudopods you can extrude. I know here it says 5, but this is in the Bestiary and it doesn't even say 10 feet long. It says extrude up to 5 pseudopods, which is weird, right? There's no limitation here. Technically, you could just keep extruding pseudopods forever, right? There's no limit on how many pseudopods you can make. You can look like a spined ball, which is weird, right? So this whole paragraph right here is very strange and could have been worded better. I think there's a lot of ways you could have worded this better to make it more clear, like reusing the pseudopod over and over again to do things on following bonus actions. A little bit weird. But otherwise, right? Otherwise, we love this. Otherwise, Plasmoids are really cool. We finally get an ooze race, and they're really committed to the art and the direction. They're really committed to being an ooze and all the things that oozes interact with. The features feel like ooze features. Obviously, you don't get blind sight and you don't get those restrained things, but you can slip through spaces as narrow as an inch wide. You can reshape yourself to shape like whatever you want. Resistance to acid and poison damage, advantage on poisoned, dark vision, hold breath, resistant, immune to humanoid targeting spells, and you get this little pseudopod friend. So it's a good race. Very, very strong. Very, very good. And I believe that brings us to our final race, the Thri-Kreen. Let's talk about the Thri-Kreen. Oh, by the way, this whole thing is reference to Dralicites from Spelljammer. I have a short about that now. I do shorts now. Check them out if you haven't seen them. The Thri-Kreen is basically the replacement of the Vrusk. The Vrusk is like a centaur-esque mantis that was playable in Space Frontiers, but they were like, hey, we already have a bug thing in our setting. Why don't we just use that instead? So they threw the Thri-Kreen out of Athos, out of Dark Sun, and chucked it into space. And that's where the Thri-Kreen are now. Let's talk about bugs. Carnivores, insectile features, 2 pairs of arms. We're coming back to this. Protective chitin that is good as armor, don't need to sleep. Periods of activity to revitalize themselves. Like, they still need to rest, but they don't need to sleep. Thri-Kreen don't really talk. In the original Bestiary, the Thri-Kreen have a language called Thri-Kreen, which they speak to each other in. The Thri-Kreen language is not mentioned at all here, but they kind of say that they clack their mandibles and wave their antennae, which conveys to the other Thri-Kreen what they're feeling. That's kind of the replacement of the Thri-Kreen language, like as a mechanical thing you could take. Other creatures find this difficult to impossible to duplicate, obviously, because this is kind of pointless. Impossible to duplicate because, they need antennae and mandibles. And to interact with other species, they talk in your mind. They're telepathic. They use weapons of their own design, which are not mentioned in the stat block. I haven't read the Astral Menagerie or any of the books like in full, but these weapons that they talk about, the Githka, the 2-handed polearm, and the Chachka, which is the flat rectangular wedge with 3-sworded blades, which sound like really cool items, right? I don't know if they're mentioned in the Spelljammer book. I don't know if they're there. but they sound sick. This looks a lot like the double-bladed scimitar of the elves, and this looks a lot like a shuriken. Or like a 3-bladed hand weapon. Oh no, it's a lightning throw, so it's a shuriken. And they make it themselves, which is sick, you know? They reference the original Thri-Kreen set block, which has existed for all of eternity, and there are new ones, the Thri-Kreen Gladiator, Thri-Kreen Hunter, and the Thri-Kreen Mystic, which can turn invisible, which is crazy, and drain life, which is also crazy, but nothing that your player character will be able to do. That's the Thri-Kreen. You know them, you love them, you recognize them from probably your own campaigns. But what do they look like when you get to play as them as a player? Well, let's talk about it. So the flavor text didn't change at all, really. The only thing that changed is that they are fully aware of what's going on around them. They left this out because it seemed a bit redundant. But let's talk about the Thri-Kreen traits. Again, left side is the official one, right side is the new one. Right side is the old one. Creature type, you're a monstrosity. So the monstrosity creature type is kind of perfect. It's kind of amazing because you get to avoid all the spells that target humanoids in particular, but you're not targeted by any of the extraplanar stuff, right? You're not targeted by any Temple of the God, or you're not targeted by Protection from Evil and Good. You're not a target for any of those things that target Infernals and Celestials and Elementals. Nothing really targets monstrosities. It's kind of immune to all those things that target all the other creature types. It's really, really good and kind of understated. You can be medium or small, which makes sense. You can be big bug or small bug. Walk and speed 30 feet. You get the same thing the Autognomes get, which is a base armor class equal to mage armor, 13 plus dex. That is fantastic. And you can also, as an action, change the color of your carapace. You can change the color of your shell to match the color and texture of your surroundings, giving you advantage on dex checks made to hide in your surroundings, which is golden. So good. That is so good. This is so good. So far, really good things. Dark vision, always amazing. I'm just going to highlight that because dark vision is good. We're going to talk about this soon. Sleepless is great. You still have an 8-hour long rest, but it is now, you're totally conscious. You can't be surprised by people sneaking up on you, technically. And Thri-Kreen telepathy. You can't speak languages you don't know. Non-Thri-Kreen languages you know. Instead, you convey telepathy to willing creatures within 120 feet of yourself, which is very, very good. 120 feet, very, very far. And you know what is the kicker of all this? The contact creature doesn't need to share a language with you to understand your thoughts. This is so good. This lets you speak to anybody, so they don't need to speak common. Actually, they need to speak one language, so whatever language they know. But they don't need to share a language with you. It's basically tongues for free, as it's telepathic. It's so good. Obviously, if you're too far, it doesn't work. And if they don't want to talk, if they don't give consent, then the contact breaks. So you can try to reach out to somebody, and they can just cut you off, like they hang up on a cell phone, which is good, right? So far, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 great features, 1 great monster type. But the best thing of all is secondary arms. And this is why you play Thri-Kreen. This is why you pick this race. You have 2 slightly smaller secondary arms below your primary pair of arms. The secondary arms can manipulate an object, open and close a container, pick up or set down a tiny object, or wield a weapon that has a light property. Whoa, what was that last thing? I'm sorry. Wield a weapon that has a light property? Let's talk about that one. Because these are things that the Ooze can do. These are things that the Hadozee can do. But this is wild. And let's explain why, right? Arm economy, though nobody really talks about it, is a very big thing in D&D. There's an opportunity cost for your arms. If you're holding a 2-handed weapon, you can't use a shield. You can't hold a light weapon. If you're holding a shield and a sword, you can't hold your arcane focus. You can't hold a 2-handed weapon. You can't hold a healing potion. You can't do somatic spells unless you have Warcaster. The arm economy is important because what you hold in your hands dictates what you can do. Now, what if you have 2 more hands? So, what's possible here? You can build a weapon that has a light property. So first of all, those arms can hold 2 daggers, which is fantastic. And what you can do with the other hands is you can hold a shield. You can hold an arcane foci. You can hold a great axe if you really want to. You can hold 2 more daggers if you really want to. You can hold a healing potion. Suddenly, you have weapons. You can still attack with these hands, but you also have the benefits of +2 AC. You have the benefits of casting spells. You have the benefits of using a 2-handed weapon if you really want to. You can have a free hand to grapple and still do 2-handed fighting. Hear me out, right? 1 hand free for grappling, 1 hand for a shield +2 AC, 2 hands for daggers or short swords. So you can attack, so you can grapple as an action, you can as an attack action, you can attack as your second attack, you can bonus action attack with your light weapon, and you still get the benefits of a shield. That's really good. You know what else you can do? You can hold 4 daggers. You can so you don't have to use the thrown weapon fighting style to pull out daggers. You can just have 2 ready at any given time and have 4 daggers out. You could do, what else could you do? You can cast spells and still have a full weapon in your hand. So you don't have to worry about somatic components. You don't have to worry about Warcaster. There is a world, and also obviously you can hold multiple items. And if you want to get benefits from like Hex or something like that, if you have 3 weapons in hand, you can attack 3 times in turn. So attack, extra attack action, then bonus action attack for 3 procs. It's very flexible. There are very minute benefits you get from this that just barely turn the Thri-Kreen into one of the most valuable martial classes. One of the most valuable martial races, actually. And it edges above other classes because you have this innate mage armor, you have this telepathy, you have this dark vision, you have advantage on stealth checks, you have resistance to human spells, and you can get that +2 AC from shield, and you can cast weapons with a foci, and you can hold different weapons so you don't have to keep switching as your object interaction. You don't have to keep switching between weapons that are practical. You could just have all of them in your hands. This is not as powerful as people are making it out to be, but just powerful enough to be chosen very, very often, that it just might be optimal. If only for the armor class, right? You got +5 dex, you have an AC of 20 without even picking your class yet, right? It's very good. I suspect that the Thri-Kreen will be seen at a lot of optimizer tables. It'll be discussed in a lot of power-up gaming builds. Expect to see a lot of this soon, you know? I truly expect someone to break down exactly what you can do with secondary arms. I'm sure Pack or Treant Monk is gonna have a video on exactly what this means or how much damage you can pump out. It's good. This race is very, very good, and well deserved. The Thri-Kreen is really cool, and I think it's deserved to be a player class for a very long time, especially in 5th edition. So, to recap, as we run through this one more time, right? Astral Elves. Elves that live forever. What is playing somebody who lives tens of thousands of years like? What does that look like in your campaign? Does a lot of things that elves already do. Autognome. The best construct, the only construct we have so far, with so many fantastic features. Great armor. Great resistances to poison damage, advantage on saving throws, built-in healing, built-in D4, tool proficiencies. Fantastic class. Fantastic race. The Giff. Flavorful. Exciting, definitely cooler than it was. This is not amazing, but a race that specifically calls out firearms, that is something to build around, which is really cool. Firearms are on average a little bit better than most ranged weapons. Hadozee, lots of really weird shenanigans with this glide. Obviously, a conversation you have to have with your players if you allow this 2500 glide thing to happen. But they can climb, dexterous feet, they can glide, they have resistance to damage, they can reduce damage. Very good class, very good race. And this whole Captain America backstory is very interesting. Plasmoids, already gushed about them. They're very, very fun. Their stat block is, you know, not as amazing as everybody else's, but the fact you can squeeze through spaces narrows an inch wide, resistance to acid and poison damage, advantage on saving throws against being poisoned, still very good, still very fun. Absolutely going to play a Plasmoid. And Thri-Kreen, the strongest of the bunch, I believe. Honestly, without any jank. That built-in armor class, that telepathy, this whole secondary arms deal, so good. So good. I suspect that a lot of these will be asked to be played at a lot of tables, even if the setting doesn't call for it. So this is kind of my warning and my message to a lot of DMs out there to become familiar with these classes and realize what kind of stories can be told by them, and also what it means for balancing, also what it means for what is allowed in your campaign. Gliding, what do you call it? Firearms, oozes. What does that mean for your story? Elves that are thousands of years old. There's a lot. I'm looking forward to this. This book comes out Tuesday. By the time I upload in 2 days, this talk is going to be obviously obsolete. I'm planning to have a whole lot of I have 3 shorts out right now about these classes. I'm going to have some character race specific builds videos on that. I'm going to have what I aim to have is kind of a DM's primer to what to expect from these classes if players ask to, play them. And I really like covering this stuff. I think all of these races are very, very exciting and very, very fun. So, to anyone listening in the future, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a lot of fun with these races and talk these through with your players and see what they love to do with them. And above all, stay frosty.